Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, 1987's Lust for Freedom. 1987's Lust for Freedom. This is actually the Vinegar Syndrome DVD that they released a little while ago, but there is also a Trauma DVD with kind of a cartoon cover. But this one is from the original negative with some special features. So I picked this up off of Vinegar Syndrome's Black Friday sale of 2016. 1987's Lust for Freedom. There's some artwork there, and again, there's the back. We got a couple scenes right there you can see, and the side right there as well. And the Vinegar Syndrome logo. Here it is, folks. Now, this is actually directed by the guy who did Class of Nukem High Parts 2 and 3, and produced by Lloyd Kaufman. So this is a kind of a co-Trauma production, and you will see the Trauma intro screen at the beginning of the film. So let's get into Lust for Freedom. We have a very, very interesting, unique take on the women in prison genre. This is a very low budget movie that has a true 80s feel to it. It has that type of weird dialogue, that weird low budget dialogue. It has that awesome, just dark and weird and sleazy and kind of mean-spirited atmosphere, but in a different way. The women in prison genre, of course, is always sleazy. It's always mean-spirited. And when you get into Franco's stuff and Erwin C. Dietrich's stuff, it gets really sexual and sleazy and dark. But this one is a really unique take on it that's complete with first-person narration, a unique reason for women getting into the prison, some interesting cop drama, some interesting themes involving freedom, of course, and also, kind of standing up for justice. There's some interesting themes kind of floating around in there. We also have wrestling matches. We have drugs, lesbian sex. We have just some real dark elements to this, and really, I'm going to say that the corruption that is typical in a women in prison film, the corruption of the warden, the corruption of the leadership at the prison, takes on a whole new light in this particular film. It also has a little bit of like a Wolf Creek, if you remember that Australian horror film Wolf Creek, a little bit of a Wolf Creek Road Warriors type of vibe, as well as we're not just inside of the prison, we're also on kind of the desert Nevada roads, I believe, or desert California roads. So there's a lot of different elements to Lust for Freedom. Let's get into the movie. First and foremost, we look at the music. Well, the music blasts in the title sequence with a pretty explosive title sequence. And we have the Lust for Freedom song. We also have another main song of the film with Hell in the title, and I believe both of those songs are done by the 80s heavy metal band Grim Reaper, which is stated in the closing credits. So we have two 80s heavy metal songs, hard rock heavy metal type songs, which are really great, really solidify the 80s vibe of the film. But then we also have a score for the film that was done by John Massari, who I believe did the Killer Clowns from Outer Space score. And the score is very minimal throughout the film, and they do loop those two heavy metal songs throughout the film a lot, but we do have a very dark and tense, and occasionally with a rhythm to it, score by John Massari in this film that really encompasses the vibe of this movie, which is dark. It's mean, it's nasty, but when you mix that dark, mean, nasty with a 80s, totally 80s acting, 80s hair, 80s clothing. You get a very unique vibe. This is not the typical nasty that you might be used to in women in prison films, because there are other elements to this film. It's a little bit more complex in this particular film. So the music of John Massari, the score from him, is mostly dark. It's atmospheric. It's tense, but in an 80s way. And sometimes I can almost hear some of the sounds from the Killer Clowns from Outer Space film that he plays with in his repertoire. So when we look at the style for Lust for Freedom, like I said, we have some first-person narration that kicks off the film and goes throughout the film. Not all the time, but just the kind of pivotal moments, you'll have that first-person character, and that'll give you a little bit of a safety, I'm going to say, also, because you kind of know that character is not dead. Ultimately has a good end to that character. There's, you have just great 80s color to the film in terms of the outfits, the makeup. But the interesting thing about this is that we have some very claustrophobic, low-budget prison locations. And we also are, like I said before, on desert roads. Predominantly, we are on desolate desert roads next to this nice lake. And then we are also in a claustrophobic, women's prison. Now, we have a couple kind of quick edited shots in the film that are kind of fast paced, and the editing for the film is fast paced. The fight sequences, I have to tell you, predominantly between this really, really heavy woman and this kind of smoking girl who smokes a lot. I think her name is Vicky. Their fight sequences do not look like there are any stunt doubles at all. And they're flipping each other on the ground in a wrestling rink, but on the ground predominantly, really doing some dangerous type flips. I don't know if these girls were real stunt people in real life. But the fight sequences are actually quite effective in this film, and there are a lot of them. We have just great hits that sometimes look real, punching, kicking, throwing things, explosions, knives, guns. I mean, it's, the whole thing, and it's edited and paced really well. Now, if you remember the 90s show called USA Up All Night, I've made references to this show a lot on this channel, but it was on the channel called USA. And they used to have this show on, every weekend, late at night, showing films like The Toxic Avenger and Summer Job and Malibu Bikini Shop and Friday the 13th, stuff like that. This definitely has that vibe of that 80s low budget exploitation vibe, that 80s exploitation vibe. And in this film, we have action, we have violence, we have nudity and sleaze, and we also have storyline twists and turns, and this is a film of characters as well. We have the first person character doing the narration, and we also have characters within the prison. These aren't just random throwaway people who are just, jerks or whatever. We have some characters, some villains per se, that come to the prison as well. And we even learn some backstories on some of these people, on some of the prisoners as well. Now, when we look at the sleaze factor for this film, I was actually quite shocked, because we go into this film, and in the first, I think 15, 20 minutes goes by, there's no nudity, and you're thinking to yourself, how this is interesting. This is a really unique women in prison film. What's going on here? And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. And not only are we getting topless nudity, we are getting very close with the camera, hairy vagina as well. So we're getting full frontal nudity from women in this film. Close panty shots. We have rape scenes. We have a guy looking at a penthouse or some porno magazine in the film from a distance. But tons of, like, and all of a sudden when it happens, and it happens for like a section of the film in this voyeuristic, but not in the typical voyeuristic way. You'll see what I mean. Um, so, topless, vagina shots, which I was not prepared for at all. Now, we're not talking about anything, overly explicit, but I wasn't expecting, the bottom half, if you understand what I'm saying. So that was, so it's just like shooting it, not, Franco going in, if you know, catch my drift. So we definitely have a high sleaze factor in this film, and involving rape as well. And in terms of the violence of the movie, the violence is also very explosive, just like the sleaze, and the nudity happens, all of a sudden, abruptly and happening nonstop. There's violence throughout the film, definitely, and there's lots of blood in this film as well, and I thought pretty effective blood from the get-go, a death in the beginning of the movie. And tense situations involving the violence and the crime of the film. But there is an explosive, violent sequences in the climax of this film that reminded me of the explosive sleaziness in the middle of the film with the rampant nudity. Look out for Michelle Bauer as well. There's also a lesbian sequence that involves kissing and being completely naked, and definitely some kissing and stroking and sucking in nipples and stuff like that. So you got that in here, definitely. But the violence is explosive, and it's mean, and it's nasty, and it guns and fire and punches and kicks and knives, and I mean the gun violence in here was wild and nasty with blood and everything for a low budget. Looked, I thought it was awesome. And the film starts with an explosion and it kind of ends with gunfire. And also kind of a shocking ending as well, with some heart, which was very interesting, some emotions. But the violence is nasty, and we kind of had, we kind of have some road violence as well that reminded me, as I said before, of the Australian horror film Wolf Creek, kind of, a killer on the road. And you kind of are in mystery at the beginning of this movie because you don't exactly know what is going on, and you're kind of with the first person narration, and you don't know what's going on and why it's happening and what the twists and the turns are, and things just kind of open up and makes for a very unique women in prison film, low budget 80s, with exploitation and sexploitation, kind of all mixed in the mix. And as I said, the sleaze shocked me, the level of it, and the violence shocked me, the level of it, and really great fight choreography, and just, I really felt this, and I can't explain it other than this. I felt a unique darkness to this film, a unique nastiness to this film. It was very hopeless. It was very rough. I mean, all women in prison films are, but for some reason I felt differently. There was a unique quality to the nastiness and the darkness of Lust for Freedom. This is Lust for Freedom. It's darker than you're thinking. This is not your typical trauma film in that regard. This is a darker, mean, nasty film, but uniquely, and I can't exactly explain that. And listen to that 80s metal and a great score. Here we go, folks. 1987's Lust for Freedom. Thank you so much for watching the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page.